Hey everybody, it's Akfamilyhome, and today is a very special day indeed, as the first installment in the Rhythm Heaven series, Rhythm Tengoku, was released 11 years ago today in Japan for the Game Boy Advance. Was originally conceived as a training program for Rhythm, ended up being one of Nintendo's most notable and wacky side franchises, spanning multiple platforms. And to commemorate this occasion, I'm going to be sharing some obscure facts and trivia about the development of the first game, taken from a Japanese article stashed away on the Hobonichi website, which I'll put a link to in the description if you're interested. Now, to my knowledge, this article was never fully translated, so I had to try my best using both Google Translate and actual help from people who know Japanese to get the following info as accurate as possible. Of course, it won't be 100% perfect, so while I'm confident about the accuracy, I still want to put out a disclaimer here, so please refer to the original article if you're interested and want to know more. Oh, and also a big thank you to my friends at the Rhythm League who will be helping as guest commentators throughout the video. With that out of the way, here's some Rhythm Tengoku development trivia you might not have known. To begin with, while Rhythm Tengoku was announced and released in 2006, development technically started in 2002 when lead designer and chief planner Kazuyoshi Osawa created a prototype of a drumming game for the Game Boy Advance. This would later evolve into the concept of rhythm minigames in 2004, and the drumming game was included in the final game in the form of a side mode. When the main designer of Rhythm Heaven, Songku, came up with the game's concept, he was heavily inspired by Brain Age, a brain training game for the DS released during the development of Tengoku. Similar to how Brain Age was designed with different minigames to train people's brain skills and memory, Songku wanted Rhythm Tengoku to serve as a training program for the rhythmic sense of Japanese people, which he first called Rhythm IQ. This is why, unlike other rhythm games, Rhythm Heaven relies more heavily on audio cues instead of, say, quick reflexes. To train the development staff's sense of rhythm, Songku even had them take dance lessons to the game's soundtrack. It was also originally planned for Rhythm Tengoku to have a similar gameplay progression as Brain Age, where rhythm games are grouped into genres, testing specific aspects of rhythm, and having tests with progressive difficulty. Ultimately, they thought this mechanic would make the game too boring and monotonous, and thus they simply put the various rhythm games together, as they were all fun in and of themselves, similar to the assortment of microgames in the WarioWare series. The name of Rhythm Heaven, believe it or not, was actually born out of a mistake. During Tengoku's early days as a rhythm training program, it was called Rhythm IQ or RIQ by the development staff, after the term Songku used to describe rhythm sense. But halfway through development, the staff realized the name didn't convey the concept clear enough, and thus arranged a meeting to discuss the final name. During the meeting, the name Rhythm Tengoku or Rhythm Heaven was allegedly suggested by one of the staff members, and it was mutually agreed upon. However, it turns out the staff member didn't even suggest the name Rhythm Tengoku in the first place. It was supposed to be a much weirder name, but due to a possible slip of the tongue, it was misheard as Rhythm Tengoku instead. As for what the original intended name was, we may never know. Remnants of Rhythm Heaven stays as Rhythm IQ can still be found in the internal sound files of Rhythm Heaven DS, Fever, and Megamix, where the abbreviation RIQ can be found. It is also possible that the Japanese name of the TV station in the ringside game, RIQ TV, is a reference to Rhythm Heaven's earlier name.
Every Rhythm Heaven fan probably first knew about the game's main designer, Songku, from his name being featured occasionally on the title screen and credits, but really nothing more than that. The reason was that Songku did not want his name to be prominently featured in the game like a brand, even though he was well known in the Japanese music industry. He feared that people would simply view the game as if Songku merely supervised it and was inserting his name into the product for exposure, when in reality he was as firmly involved with the game's designs and components as much as the rest of the staff. Despite this, he still wanted to feature himself in the game in some way or fashion, except without using his actual name or appearance. The solution then was to make a character that was based on Songku instead. The suggestion he gave the development team eventually began the drum samurai that guides you through the tutorial at the beginning of the game. So yes, Songku is technically canon in the Rhythm Heaven universe. Here's another random fact about Songku. His first video game machine was a Game Boy Advance, and whenever he plays games on a handheld like the Game Boy Micro or a Nintendo DS, he never holds it in his hands but instead sets it down on a table to play, probably due to being accustomed to working with keyboard and drum machines. The development staff has jokingly stated that he'll probably be playing his future handhelds the same way as well.
Obviously, being the first game in the series, Rhythm Tengoku has had its fair share of scrapped game ideas. One notable unused game that the dev team mentioned was one in which you swung a stick around. You press the button to swing it and then release the button to return to the original position, and then had to perform these two actions to the rhythm. However, the development team feared it would be too difficult for players to learn how to release a button to the beat, so it was scrapped. A long list of other unused game names in Rhythm Tengoku was also mentioned. Notable names include Rhythm Batting, Drum Robot, Rhythm Cooking, Heartbeat, Rhythm Gymnastics, Policeman, and Tanuki and Monkey. There is a slight possibility that some of the unused ideas later made their way into future Rhythm Heaven games.
Even the mini-games that were decided to be included in the game went through changes in development, most notably in their titles. Showtime, a game where you hit the ball for penguins to catch, was originally called Essa, or Bait. The staff found that giving a ball for penguins to catch resembled the act of feeding them food, and thus gave the game this preliminary name, but it didn't fit well with the final product, so it was changed. Some early names for other games were also very literal, like Nightwalk, which was originally called 4-beat keeping, because you had to keep the beat, which was in 4/4 time. In the Rhythm Tweezers game, you pluck hair off of onions to the beat, but during development, the game originally featured the faces of the development staff instead, and you had to pluck hair off of their heads. The team scrapped this idea as they thought it was too gross, and graphic designer Kotei Kiuchi came up with the onion design after hearing the Arabian-styled music and was reminded of Arabian mosques, which were shaped like onions. During pre-release testing, the development team found that the Love Machine side mode, in which one presses different buttons to string together a love confession, was very popular among female students in elementary and junior high school. The side mode was also supposed to feature the song Love Machine from the female idol group Morning Musume, formed by Songku himself in 1997. However, the idea was scrapped, presumably due to legal issues.
Rhythm Tengoku was the final first-party Nintendo game released on the GBA, at a time when the DS Lite was already in the market. Thus, near the end of development, Tengoku was originally planned to be ported to the DS long before a DS sequel was planned. However, the porting process would require extra effort and time, and as some Japanese artists have created songs for Tengoku, porting the game would mean delaying the time that the artists would get to officially release their work. Thus, the porting idea was dismissed. And that's all the facts I have for today. The idea of a rhythm game that actually put more emphasis on rhythmic synths and audio cues instead of visual ones proved to be a moderate success in Japan and gave birth to the Rhythm Heaven series as we know it today. And these development tidbits really made me learn a lot more about the series' origins and reminded me of why I loved Rhythm Heaven in the first place, so hopefully you got to learn some new things from this video as well. Anyway, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go play some Megamix to celebrate the series anniversary, so I'll catch you guys later. MVBBY.